My name is Sarah and I'm 32 years old. For 5 years, I worked at a company called Apex Innovations. Sounds fancy, right? It was a medium-sized firm based in downtown Atlanta specializing in project management software solutions. Think lots of open-plan offices, glass walls, and a constant hum of keyboards. I was a project operations coordinator, which basically meant I was the person who made sure all the trains ran on time for a specific set of clients. I loved my job, honestly. I'm a very organized person. I thrive on checklists, spreadsheets, and making sure everything is efficient and accurate. There's a quiet satisfaction in seeing a complex project move smoothly from start to finish, knowing you've ironed out all the kinks. When I started, the department was pretty small and I reported directly to Mark, who was the operations director. Mark was a great guy, very hands-on, always supportive. But about 3 years in, the company decided to expand. They brought in a new layer of management, and that's how Brenda entered my life. Brenda was hired as the senior operations manager, meaning I and a couple of other coordinators now reported to her and she reported to Mark. From day one, Brenda was charming. She was probably in her early 40s, always impeccably dressed with a laugh that could fill a room. She was fantastic at networking, at striking up conversations with executives from other departments, at making everyone feel like she was their best friend. She'd always have a new story about her weekend getaway or her latest shopping spree or some fancy restaurant she'd tried. She was very good at being seen. And initially I thought, okay, this is what senior management looks like. Busy, connected, always out and about. But then the reality started to sink in. Brenda's busy schedule rarely seemed to involve actual work. Her days were in delegation, which on the surface sounds like good management, but what it really meant was that she'd pass off almost everything, and I mean everything, to me and the other coordinators. At first it was subtle. Sarah, can you just whip up that client report? I'm swamped with meetings. Or, hey, can you draft that new operations guideline? I need to review it before lunch. I'd do it, of course. It was my job to support her and I was good at it. I was also genuinely excited to prove myself, to show I could handle more responsibility. The problem was Brenda's swamped with meetings usually meant she was at a long, leisurely lunch with a vendor, not even a client, just a vendor trying to sell us new software, or chatting loudly by the coffee machine for an hour, or browse online shopping sites in her office with the door slightly ajar. I'd walk by and hear giggling or see a screen full of designer shoes. She'd leave at 4:30 p.m. sharp most days, often for an important networking event, while I'd be sitting there sometimes until 7 or 8 p.m. finishing her tasks. It slowly dawned on me that I wasn't just supporting Brenda, I was doing Brenda's job. My inbox was constantly flooded with emails from clients and internal teams that should have gone to her, but she'd just set up an auto-forward rule. Meetings she was supposed to lead, she'd send me in her place with a vague, "Sarah can handle it, she's fully up to speed." Presentations she was meant to deliver. I'd research, compile, design, and even create the speaking notes. Then she'd breeze in 5 minutes before, present it as her own work, accept all the applause, and maybe give me a quick, almost whispered "good job, Sarah," if I was lucky. The other coordinators, Liam and Jessica, noticed it too. We were all in the same boat. We'd exchange knowing glances in meetings when Brenda would confidently present data that she hadn't touched or talk about a project milestone that she hadn't even checked on. Sometimes, after Brenda had floated off for a strategy session, which usually meant a long coffee break, Liam would lean over to me and whisper, "So, what are we working on today for Brenda?" Jessica would just shake her head and chuckle. We all understood. We were the actual operations managers in all but title and pay. It wasn't just the big projects either. It was the daily grind, the complex vendor negotiations she'd fob off on me, the budget tracking that she'd review by just glancing at the summary I'd prepared, the constant emergencies that only seemed to happen when she was about to head out for a long lunch, which she'd then declare my top priority. I was essentially the invisible engine keeping her perfectly polished train running, and she was riding it all the way to the top. The frustrating part was that Brenda was really good at selling the illusion. To Mark, the director, she was proactive, delegating effectively, a real leader. He'd praise her efficiency, her ability to empower her team, and I'd just smile and nod because what was I going to say? Actually, Mark, Brenda spends half her day on her phone and I do all her work. It sounded petty, jealous, and like something a not a team player would say. So I just kept my head down, kept working, kept making sure everything ran perfectly, partly because I genuinely cared about the projects and our clients, and partly because I didn't want Brenda to have any excuse to find fault with my work. I often stayed late. Sometimes I'd be the last one in the office, the cleaning crew pushing their carts around me. Brenda would be long gone, probably at some happy hour. I'd be there fixing an error she'd overlooked or preparing a report she'd forgotten about, knowing that the next morning she'd present it as her own effortlessly produced masterpiece. The resentment simmered, a low, constant burn. I was overworked, underappreciated, and watching someone else get all the credit for my efforts. But I also knew I was keeping the department afloat. I was the one ensuring our clients were happy, our projects were on schedule, and for a while that was enough. I just kept telling myself that hard work eventually gets noticed. I couldn't have been more wrong. This quiet, frustrating dynamic was about to blow up in my face and take Brenda down with it. Life at Apex Innovations continued in that strange, unspoken rhythm. I was the silent workhorse, Brenda was the charismatic frontwoman, and everyone else just knew. We kept churning out projects, hitting deadlines thanks to me, and celebrating Brenda's leadership thanks to me too. I had started to feel a bit like a cartoon character with a perpetually tired expression, but I still told myself that being indispensable meant security. It meant my hard work would eventually be recognized. I clung to that idea even as the resentment grew, like a slow-burning ember in my chest. What I didn't realize was that all that unspoken tension, all those cut corners and deferred responsibilities on Brenda's part were building up, like a pressure cooker, and eventually something had to give. It all started with Project Phoenix. This was a huge, complex undertaking for a new high-profile client, a massive tech company that needed our project management software customized and integrated into their entire global operation. The contract was worth millions, a really big deal for Apex. Brenda was supposedly the lead manager for our department on this, overseeing the entire implementation budget, client invoicing, and vendor payments. It was her baby, or at least, that's what she told Mark and the rest of the executive team. In reality, from day one, Brenda treated Project Phoenix like a minor distraction. She spent most of her time schmoozing with the client's executives over fancy dinners, charming them with vague promises about synergy and cutting-edge solutions. The actual nitty-gritty of the budget, the complex payment schedules for our external contractors, the multiple layers of client invoicing, that all fell to me. Sarah, she'd say, handing me a stack of papers and a vague instruction, can you just ensure the Phoenix billing is flawless? It's critical, I trust you. Or just make sure those contractor payments are on time, I'm tied up with strategizing for Q3. She'd sign off on things without even looking, barely glancing at the spreadsheets I'd meticulously prepared, trusting me completely. Which of course wasn't trust, it was laziness. For months, I juggled the daily demands of Project Phoenix alongside all my other coordinator duties. I was constantly chasing down receipts, verifying contractor hours, cross-referencing payment schedules, and drafting invoices. The client was huge, and their internal systems were complicated, so the billing process alone was a nightmare. I flagged several potential issues to Brenda, like a discrepancy in a major contractor's hourly rate or a payment milestone that didn't quite match the signed contract. Each time she'd wave her hand, don't worry about it, Sarah, just process it, I've already approved it with the client. Or it's fine, it's just a slight adjustment, we'll reconcile it later. I felt a knot of anxiety, but she was the manager, she'd approved it, what else could I do? The first sign that something was seriously wrong came about 6 months into the project. It was a Monday morning, always the busiest day. Mark, our operations director, walked into the office looking unusually grim. His usual cheerful demeanor was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped frown. He went straight to Brenda's office, which was rare. Usually she came to him. Their door closed, and for the next hour we could hear raised voices, not shouting but definitely heated. The entire open-plan office held its breath. Everyone knew something big was up. Later that afternoon, an email landed in my inbox and in Liam's and Jessica's and practically everyone on the Phoenix team. It was from the client, titled Urgent Project Phoenix Billing Discrepancy. My heart dropped into my stomach. The email stated in no uncertain terms that our latest invoice for Project Phoenix was off by a staggering $250,000. Not just a little off, but $250,000. It was an overcharge, an egregious error that the client was not happy about. They threatened to pause all further payments until it was resolved and demanded an immediate explanation. Chaos erupted in our department. Phones started ringing off the hook. Brenda, who was usually out networking or on one of her long lunches, was suddenly glued to her desk looking frantic. She called an emergency meeting. In the conference room, she paced back and forth, wringing her hands. This is unacceptable, she declared, looking at all of us. Someone has made a critical error, $250,000. We need to find out immediately who is responsible for this. I felt a cold dread creep over me. I knew it was related to one of those adjustments Brenda had insisted on. I started going through my own meticulously kept notes and emails, pulling up every communication I'd had with Brenda about Phoenix billing. I found the emails where I'd flagged the discrepancies, where she'd replied, just process it, I've approved it. I had a paper trail, I thought. Then came the summons. Sarah, Mark wants to see you in his office. Brenda too. My stomach clenched. This was it. When I walked into Mark's office, Brenda was already there, looking surprisingly composed, almost regretful. Mark sat behind his desk, looking exhausted. Sarah, he began, his voice heavy with disappointment, we have a serious issue with Project Phoenix. That $250,000 overcharge. Brenda and I have been reviewing everything, and it seems the error stems from the contractor payments and the corresponding client invoices. He paused, looking at me directly. Brenda tells me you were primarily responsible for managing those specific financial aspects of Project Phoenix, correct? My blood ran cold. Primarily responsible? I was responsible because she made me responsible. I looked at Brenda. She met my gaze, not with malice, but with a bland, almost innocent expression, as if to say, well, you were doing it, weren't you? Yes, I handled the processing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I flagged several discrepancies to Brenda. I have emails where I asked about specific overpayments and she instructed me to proceed, saying she had approved them. Brenda immediately cut in, her voice sounding sympathetic but firm. Yes, Sarah did bring up some minor questions, which I addressed at the time, but ultimately the responsibility for verifying the final figures, for ensuring everything was double-checked before submission, lay with the coordinator handling that stream. I trusted Sarah with that. She looked at Mark with a look of deep regret. I obviously put too much faith in her ability to manage such a complex financial stream independently. My mistake was not micromanaging her more closely, given the scale of the project. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. She made it sound like she was taking the blame for my mistake while subtly, expertly throwing me completely under the bus. She was trusting me. I was managing independently. She was not micromanaging. Every phrase was designed to shift the responsibility directly onto my shoulders. Mark sighed. Sarah, this is a serious lapse, $250,000. It damages our relationship with a key client and it reflects very poorly on the department. Given Brenda's overall oversight and your direct handling of these payments, the error falls squarely on you. I felt a wave of nausea. But I have emails, I protested, my voice rising in disbelief. I literally have proof that I questioned this and Brenda told me to proceed. She approved it. Emailing questions isn't the same as ensuring accuracy, Sarah, Brenda said softly, almost sadly, her eyes still fixed on Mark, avoiding mine. The final responsibility is yours. Mark nodded slowly. We'll need to conduct a full internal review, Sarah. In the meantime, you're being put on administrative leave, effective immediately, pending the outcome. We'll reassign your current client accounts. This is a very serious matter. I stood there stunned. Administrative leave? My job, after all the times I had covered for her, stayed late, fixed her mistakes. She was blaming me for her financial mismanagement. The injustice of it was a physical blow. My vision blurred. I had worked tirelessly, silently to keep her afloat, and now she was letting me drown. My head spun with betrayal, anger, and a desperate, burning need to prove them all wrong. Administrative leave felt like a punishment, a mark against my name, and the injustice of it burned through me. $250,000, and it was my fault? After all the times I'd covered for Brenda, all the hours I'd put in to keep her perfectly polished train running, the unfairness of it was a bitter taste in my mouth. For the first couple of days, I just paced around my apartment, fueled by rage and disbelief. I called my best friend and just ranted for an hour straight. She listened patiently, then said, Sarah, you're not going to just let this happen, are you? You have proof. You told me you keep everything. And she was right. I did keep everything. I'm an organizer, remember? My files, both digital and physical, were meticulous. Every email, every task assigned, every sign-off. My brain, despite the swirling anger, started to click into problem-solving mode. I couldn't just sit here and let Brenda ruin my career. I had to fight back, and I knew exactly how. I pulled out my old laptop, the one I used for personal stuff, never connected to the company network. I opened up my personal email and started digging through years of forwarded messages. Emails from Brenda. Sarah, can you handle this client presentation entirely? I'm double booked. Draft up the new quarterly report. I'll just sign off. Just process that contractor payment for Project Phoenix. I've it. These were the little directives that had slowly but surely shifted her entire workload onto my plate. Each email was a tiny brick in the wall of my defense. They showed a clear pattern of delegation that crossed the line from management into complete abdication of responsibility. Then there were my own internal notes. Every time Brenda had gone on a long lunch or spent hours on personal calls or just didn't show up for a meeting she was supposed to lead, I had quietly made a note, not out of malice, but because her absences often created work for me. I'd mark down the date, the time, the task I had to complete because she wasn't there or wasn't paying attention. These notes were like a secret diary of her negligence, a detailed log of her social butterfly tendencies versus my invisible workhorse reality. But the most damning evidence, that came from a decision I'd made about 6 months ago, before Project Phoenix even began. I remember Brenda had messed up something minor. A smaller client's invoice was incorrect because she'd misread a contract detail and she'd tried to subtly blame me for it. It was a quick, whispered comment to Mark, something like, well, Sarah was handling the initial processing, I just trusted her. I caught it and it was like a tiny alarm bell went off in my head. I thought, if she's willing to do this for a small mistake, what about a big one? That's when I decided to start quietly recording some of my one-on-one conversations with Brenda. Not all of them, just the crucial ones, especially when she was delegating something significant or when I was raising a flag about something. I used a simple voice recorder app on my phone, keeping it discreetly in my pocket or on my desk, just out of sight. I wasn't doing it to entrap her, not at first. It was purely for my own protection, to have an objective record in case her version of events ever differed wildly from mine. I knew it was a bit extreme, but after that small incident, I just had a gut feeling I'd need it. I was in a one-party consent state for recordings, so I was legally in the clear. Still, it felt sneaky, but desperate times, right? And now these recordings were my secret weapon. I found the one related to Project Phoenix. It was from a brief meeting where I brought up the contractor rate discrepancy. My voice was clear, asking Brenda, "Hey Brenda, I just wanted to double check this contractor's rate for Project Phoenix. It seems higher than what was in the initial SOW." Brenda's voice, breezy and impatient, was just as clear. "Oh, don't worry about that, Sarah. That's already been approved. Just process it. I've personally signed off on it." And then a little sigh, "Honestly, you overthink things. Just process it. She approved it. That was the $250,000 instruction, and it was all there recorded, her exact words." I also found a recording from a team meeting where Brenda was presenting her progress on Project Phoenix. She was talking about hitting milestones, about my team's incredible efficiency, and how I personally oversee all financial aspects to ensure accuracy. My voice was on the recording too, answering questions from Mark about specific budget lines, providing details that she should have known but clearly didn't. It was proof that I was doing her job while she was taking the credit. The process of compiling everything felt methodical, almost therapeutic. I arranged it chronologically. I built a separate document that cross-referenced every instance of delegation with the actual task I completed, noting the time and effort involved. I made tables comparing Brenda's stated responsibilities from her job description, which I found online, with the actual work she performed versus the work I performed. It was like building a meticulously researched case for a court of law, but my court was the executive floor. As I worked, the anger didn't disappear, but it shifted. It became a cold, focused determination. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about setting the record straight, about proving that isn't about being seen, but about doing the work ethically and diligently. They called me overthinking, not a team player. Now they were going to see what happens when an overthinking person decides to bring receipts. By the end of the week, I had it all. A thick, well-organized binder of hard copies and an equally comprehensive digital file on a secure USB drive. Emails, my notes, Brenda's job description, project timelines with my actual contributions highlighted, and of course the audio recordings, transcribed and clearly labeled. It was undeniable. It told a story of neglect, deception, and a $250,000 mistake that was not, by any stretch of the imagination, my fault. The next step was terrifying. Who do you send this to? Mark had already sided with Brenda. Going to him again felt pointless. HR was an option, but often HR's first loyalty is to the company, not the individual. I needed someone higher, someone who would truly care about such a massive financial error and the implications of having a senior manager who was a fraud. I decided to send it directly to the CEO of Apex Innovations, a man named Mr. Harrison, with a copy to the head of Human Resources outlining everything. It was a huge risk, but after being thrown under the bus so publicly, with my career hanging in the balance, I knew I had no other choice. It was time to pull the trigger. After I hit send on that email to Mr. Harrison, our CEO, with the full dossier of Brenda's incompetence and my detailed account of her blaming me, the world seemed to hold its breath. My heart pounded for hours. I had laid everything bare: the emails, my meticulous notes, and those damning audio recordings. It was a massive gamble. I could be fired for insubordination, for damaging company reputation, or worse. But I also knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that I had done the right thing. I had to. The next day passed in an agonizing blur. Every time my phone vibrated, I jumped. Every email notification made my stomach churn. Nothing, just the usual spam and a few automated alerts. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept replaying Brenda's face in Mark's office, her calm, innocent lie, and my own stunned silence. Had I just made a huge mistake? Then on Wednesday morning, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but it had an Atlanta area code. I picked it up, my voice a little shaky. "Sarah, this is Laura from HR. Mr. Harrison would like to meet with you this afternoon. Can you come to the office at 2 p.m.? Her voice was flat, professional, giving nothing away. This was it. My hands were clammy as I got ready. I wore my most professional outfit, trying to project competence and calm, even though I was a nervous wreck inside. I clutched my USB drive, a backup of the dossier just in case. When I arrived at Apex Innovations, I was directed not to my usual floor but to the executive floor. My stomach clenched. This was serious. I was led into a large, elegant conference room. Sitting at the long, polished table were Mr. Harrison, the CEO, Ms. Davies, the head of HR, the same stiff woman who had helped Brenda blame me, and a serious-looking man I recognized as the company's legal counsel, Mr. Mark. Was not there. Brenda was not there, just them and me. Mr. Harrison gestured to a chair. "Thank you for coming in, Sarah. We've received your email and the accompanying documents. We'd like you to walk us through it." His voice was calm, almost neutral, but his eyes were sharp, scrutinizing. I took a deep breath and I started talking. I went through everything chronologically. I showed them the emails where Brenda delegated her core responsibilities to me. I showed them my notes about her absences and the work I had to pick up. I showed them the discrepancies in the Project Phoenix billing, pointing out the exact instances where I had flagged issues to Brenda and how she had dismissed them. I provided the official company guidelines for financial oversight, contrasting them with Brenda's complete disregard for them. They listened silently, their expressions unreadable. Mr. occasionally jotted notes. Ms. Davies watched me intently. but then I got to the audio recordings. And finally, I said, my voice steady now, I have some audio recordings. These were made because I started to feel after a previous incident that I needed to protect myself by having an objective record of key conversations. I played the first clip. It was the recording from our meeting about the Project Phoenix contractor rate. Brenda's breezy voice, clear as day. Oh, don't worry about that, Sarah. That's already been approved. Just process it. I've personally signed off on it. As Brenda's voice filled the room, the atmosphere shifted. Mr. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. Ms. Davies exchanged a quick, shocked glance with Mr. I played another clip, one from a team meeting where Brenda was taking credit for my work on a presentation. My team's incredible efficiency, which I personally oversee, she said, followed by my voice giving precise, detailed answers to Mark's questions about the project, answers that clearly came from someone who had done all the heavy lifting. When the last recording ended, the room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Mr. Harrison leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his gaze fixed on me. Sarah, he said, his voice now tinged with genuine concern, this is damning. You have clearly gone above and beyond, and Brenda has clearly been misrepresenting her involvement and placing undue responsibility on you. Ms. Davies, who had been so dismissive before, looked visibly shaken. We'll need to review our internal audit trails immediately, she murmured, already looking at Mr. We already have, Mr. stated, his voice grim. Based on Sarah's initial email, we began a discreet internal investigation this morning. The financial discrepancies match, and her internal notes and emails correlate perfectly with the timelines we've found. It was a relief so profound I almost sagged in my chair. They believed me, they were acting. Thank you, Sarah, Mr. Harrison said, his voice now firm and resolute. You've shown immense integrity and courage. This is a very serious matter. We will be taking immediate action regarding Brenda. As for you, he paused and my heart jumped. We need your expertise and your honesty. We cannot afford to lose someone of your caliber. Later that same day, Brenda was called into Mr. Harrison's office. I didn't see her go in, but I saw her leave. She emerged about an hour later, her perfectly coiffed hair a little disheveled, her face pale, devoid of all its usual charm. She clutched a small box, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and utter defeat. She didn't look at anyone, just walked straight out of the office for good. The word spread like wildfire through the company. Brenda was gone, immediately. Resigned to pursue other opportunities was the official line, but everyone knew. The next morning, Mark called me. His voice was different, laced with genuine regret. Sarah, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Brenda misled me completely. You were right all along. I should have listened. We all should have. He sounded truly apologetic. He then delivered the good news. I was no longer on administrative leave. I was back, and not just back. Mr. Harrison has reviewed your performance, your dedication, and frankly, the incredible work you've been doing for years, largely uncredited, Mark explained. He believes you have earned a proper recognition. We'd like to offer you the position of Senior Project Operations Manager. Effectively, you'll be taking over Brenda's role, but with a structure that ensures proper support and accountability, and of course, with a significant raise. I felt a surge of triumph, so powerful it almost brought tears to my eyes. Senior Project Operations Manager, my own team, my own projects, all the responsibilities I had been doing for years, but now with the title, the recognition, and the pay I deserved. It wasn't just revenge, it was pure, unadulterated justice. When I walked back into the office the following week, the atmosphere was completely different. The unspoken tension was gone. Liam and Jessica practically cheered when they saw me. Knew you'd do it, Sarah, Liam grinned. Jessica just gave me a huge hug. Mark looked at me with genuine respect. I wasn't the invisible workhorse anymore. I was the manager, a leader, someone whose integrity had been tested and proven. My story isn't about getting revenge. It's about how frustrating it can be when someone takes credit for your work, when you're blamed for someone else's mistakes, and when the people in charge refuse to see the truth. But it's also about standing up for yourself, quietly building your case, and trusting that honesty and hard work will always, always win in the end. Brenda's downfall wasn't just about her mistakes, it was about the truth I brought to light. And that truth, finally, set me free to build the career I always dreamed of, with the respect I earned.